The Flooded World, HFY sci-fi story. The planet once known as Nerath was drowning. Rain had fallen for 92 days without rest, covering mountains, cities, and forests under black water that never stopped rising. Lightning tore open the sky every few minutes, and thunder rolled like the growl of an angry god. In the middle of the storm, a small shelter clung to the edge of a broken cliff, the last dry patch on the continent. Inside that shelter, an alien mother held her little child close, wrapping him in a wet blanket that no longer gave warmth. The child's name was Leary, his small silver eyes wide with fear, his body trembling as the wind screamed through cracks in the walls. He asked softly, "Mama, will they come for us?" She pressed her forehead against his and whispered, "Yes, someone will come," even though her voice was shaking. But deep inside she no longer believed her own words. They had sent the distress signal weeks ago, but no one answered. The sky channels were dead. The fleets had escaped and left the poor behind. Now the oceans had swallowed every landing pad. Every road, every bridge. Only ruins floated like ghosts above the flood. Outside, pieces of glass and steel drifted on the water like tiny boats. A distant tower collapsed with a sound that echoed for miles. The mother stared at it through the narrow window and felt her heart break again. Her name was Sarah, once a scientist, now just a survivor. Her husband had gone with the first evacuation team and never returned. The flood had taken everything, and their home, their hope, and soon maybe their lives. But still she refused to stop breathing. She had to protect her son no matter what. Suddenly, the shelter shook violently, water splashing through the doorway. Sarah grabbed Leary and climbed onto the table, clutching the metal ceiling beams. The tide was rising faster than ever before, through the roaring wind. She saw strange machines flying low over the water. Black, insect-like salvage drones scanning for scrap. She turned off her small beacon immediately, knowing they would destroy anything that still emitted energy. Leary began to cry, his voice almost lost in the thunder. Sarah hugged him tighter and whispered, "Don't make a sound, my love." Outside, one of the drones hovered near the window, its red eye blinking, searching. Then just as quickly it moved away, swallowed by the storm far above the planet. Beyond the storm clouds, a human exploration ship drifted through the gray orbit. Its name was TSS Vigilant Horizon, commanded by Captain Daniel Reyes. The ship had completed its mission and was preparing to jump back to the Terran sector, when a faint signal flashed across the monitor. It was old, weak, and buried under layers of static. Distress. Survivors. Nerath. Water levels rising. The communications officer frowned and said, "Probably just echo data, sir." But Captain Reyes leaned forward, listening to the ghostly voice of a woman in the storm. He said quietly, "Trace it." The crew hesitated. "Sir, that planet's unstable. The floods are planetary scale." Reyes looked at the swirling image of the blue-gray world on the screen and replied, "Still, someone's down there calling for help." Minutes later, the Vigilant Horizon broke orbit and entered the upper atmosphere. The hull groaned under pressure, rain smashing against the ship like stones. Navigation flickered and warning lights flashed red. The co-pilot shouted, "Sir, these storms are tearing the sensors apart." Reyes simply said, "Keep her steady, we're not turning back." In the storm's heart, the clouds glowed with strange electric light, flashes of blue and violet dancing across the horizon. The radar showed massive water movements below, far larger than waves, almost alive. The science officer whispered, "Sir, something's moving down there." Reyes glanced at him. "Then we move faster." On the surface, Sarah's shelter was collapsing. The roof bent under the weight of the rain. The walls cracked and the floor turned into cold mud. She looked up through the broken ceiling and screamed into the dark sky, "Please, someone help us." Lightning struck a nearby cliff, sending debris crashing into the flood. The noise was so loud it shook her bones. She wrapped Leary in her arms, trying to shield him from the falling rubble. In that moment, the child looked up through the cracks and saw a shape in the sky. A light, cutting through the storm like a blade. He pointed and gasped, "Mama, the stars are coming down." Sarah turned her head, and through the smoke and rain she saw it too. A ship, shining white under the lightning, fighting the wind to reach the surface. She could not believe her eyes. "Humans," she whispered, almost forgetting to breathe. No one from her own species had returned, but the ancient stories spoke of Terrans, bold, reckless beings who never ignored a call for help. And now, through impossible storms, one of them was coming inside the ship. Captain Reyes gripped the controls as the cruiser descended lower. The storm screamed around them and fire sparks danced across the hull. "Deploy landing thrusters," he ordered. "Set sensors to lifeform scan. 500-meter range." The crew followed quickly, their faces pale under flickering lights. Through the viewport, they saw nothing but waves and lightning, and then suddenly the radar pinged 2 weak signals. Close together, Rhea's eyes hardened. "Lock on that position." The engines roared louder, shaking every bolt in the frame. Sarah and Leary looked up again as the ship broke through the clouds above their shelter. Hovering like a silver angel over the flood, for the first time in months, Sarah felt something she thought had drowned long ago. Hope. The scene ends with the camera pulling back, the small shelter half submerged, the alien mother clutching her child, the human cruiser fighting against wind and thunder to reach them, and somewhere in the roaring storm a new story of human courage and compassion begins. The flood was endless, the sky still dark, but through the storm came a glow of silver light. The human ship lowered slowly, its thrusters turning the rising water into mist. Inside the cockpit, Captain Daniel Reyes stared at the surface through cracked glass, his jaw tight, his hands firm on the controls. "Any sign of life?" he asked, his voice calm but cold. The radar officer replied, "2 signals, sir. You're weak, but still alive, and then we move," Reyes said. Without a pause, the crew looked at one another. Fear and admiration mixed in their eyes. For this man had once landed in worse storms to save strangers no one else cared for. The vigilant horizon hovered 100 meters above the ruins. Below them, waves crashed against broken metal and drowned towers. The floodwater glowed faint blue where reactor cores had melted underwater. Reyes knew this world was dying. But he also knew someone down there refused to die quietly. He turned to his pilot. "Bring us down to 20 meters, open bay doors. Prepare rescue drones." The engines howled, fighting wind like a beast clawing at the air. The storm pushed against them, lightning striking so close the ship's hull burned bright for seconds. Still, they pressed on. Down below, Sarah and Leary watched in awe, the mother shielding her child's eyes from the blazing light of the thrusters. She had seen ships before, but never one like this. It didn't come to conquer or destroy. It came to find. "Mama, it's real," Leary whispered, tears of joy in his voice. "They came for us." Sarah could not speak, her throat tight, her heart beating so fast she thought it might stop. Outside, waves struck the walls again, and the roof began to fall. She covered Leary and whispered, "Hold on. Hold on just a little longer." From above, metallic wings opened. 2 human drones dropped through the storm, their floodlights cutting across the black water. Rhea's voice echoed through the intercom. "Scanning Sector Delta 3, ground crew. Be ready to extract." The first drone hit the water hard, sending up a burst of foam. Its sensors picked up heat, movement, and then the image appeared on the ship's screen. 2 lifeforms trapped inside a collapsing shelter. "Confirmed," Reyes said. "Prepare Rescue Team 1. The bay doors opened. Rain and wind bursting inside. 3 humans in armored suits stepped forward, their lights glowing through the mist. They clipped their harness lines and jumped into the storm, sliding down through the chaos like falling stars. Each wore the Terran insignia, a symbol that meant no one left behind. The landing was rough, the wind strong enough to rip a man away. Still, they pushed on inside the shelter. Sarah heard metallic footsteps, heavy and fast. A loud knock came from the door, followed by a human voice filtered through static. "If anyone's alive in there, stay back." "We're coming in." The child froze in fear, but Sarah whispered, "They're here to help." The door burst open, a wave of water crashing through. Through it stepped the tall shape of a man in a black exosuit. Glowing blue at the seams, his helmet light revealed his face for a second. Stern eyes, soaked hair, a scar across his cheek. He raised a hand slowly and said, "You're safe now." Sarah's lips trembled. "You came from the stars?" The human smiled faintly. "And we don't leave people behind." Behind him, the other rescuers scanned the structure as it groaned under pressure. "Captain," one said through comms, "we have to move. This place won't last 2 minutes." Reyes's voice answered through their helmets. "Get them out. Priority 1. The rescuers wrapped Leary in an emergency heat blanket and lifted him onto the stabilizer platform. Sarah followed, stumbling but refusing to let go of her son. The child clung to her and whispered, "He's warm. Mama, the human's warm." As they stepped out into the flood, A massive wave struck, knocking debris into the air. One rescuer was hit in the shoulder and nearly pulled under. Reyes's voice shouted, "Anchor line now." A cable shot from the ship above, pulling them up just as another structure collapsed behind them. For a brief moment, lightning revealed the full scene. A tiny family lifted from a dying world, surrounded by chaos and rain. It looked almost unreal, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. When they reached the bay, medics rushed forward. Covering the survivors with dry wraps, Reyes stepped out of the cockpit, his boots echoing on the metal floor. He removed his helmet, water dripping from his hair, and looked at the mother and child. Sarah stood silently, staring at this strange being of flesh and courage. Then she whispered, "You risked everything." "For us," Reyes simply replied. "It's what humans do." But the relief was short-lived. The science officer ran to him, eyes wide. "Captain, we've got a problem. The planetary dam is breaking. The entire ocean's pressure is shifting." Reyes turned toward the viewport. Outside, lightning revealed the horizon rising like a wall of black water. The dam's collapse had begun, a roaring wave heading straight toward them. "Engines at full power," he ordered. "Get us airborne now." The ship shuddered, turbines screaming as it fought the air. The flood roared higher, smashing through old towers like paper. Leary screamed and buried his face in his mother's arms. The human crew held tight, alarms blaring across every deck. The vigilant horizon lifted higher, barely escaping the water's reach. As the storm swallowed everything below, Reyes looked down and whispered, "Not today." The screen fades out with the image of the ship rising through thunder, carrying the survivors upward. The human ship glowing like a promise in the dark, and for the first time, the alien mother realized hope had a face and it was human. The storm above the planet was far from over. Even as the vigilant horizon climbed higher through the violent clouds, the entire world beneath it seemed to break apart. Lightning split the sky again and again, turning the floodwaters below into a sea of molten silver. Inside the ship, the crew ran between stations, alarms screaming, voices overlapping, and the deck trembling with every shockwave. Captain Daniel Reyes stood firm at the command console, his uniform drenched and torn but his eyes focused and calm. He watched the readings flicker wildly, atmospheric pressure dropping, ground fissures expanding, radiation spikes increasing. This planet wasn't just drowning, it was dying from the inside. The alien mother, Sarah, sat in the medical bay, clutching her child Leary close. The boy's skin glowed faintly under the scanner lights, his breathing quick but steady. A human medic kneeled beside them, offering water and a thermal wrap. "Drink," she said gently. "You're safe here." Sarah's hands shook as she accepted the cup, her voice quiet. "Your people. You came for us," the medic smiled tiredly. "That's what Captain Reyes does. He goes where no one else will." Outside the small window behind them, waves crashed against the clouds. It looked like the entire sky was falling into the sea. Suddenly the ship lurched, throwing everyone forward. The medic caught the child before he hit the floor. Reyes' voice came through the intercom. "All crew, brace for turbulence. The upper atmosphere is unstable." Lightning danced across the hull like living veins of light, and one of the side engines flared out. Sparks filled the cabin, red lights flashed, and the engineer shouted, "Main reactor cooling is dropping and we're overheating." Reyes turned sharply. "Route auxiliary power through the vent grid. Keep her alive." He looked back at the planet on the main screen, glowing fissures now visible through the clouds. "Science," he barked. "Tell me what I'm looking at." The officer hesitated, voice trembling. "Sir, it's the planetary core. It's collapsing. The flood pressure must have cracked the stabilizers. The reactor fields are melting." Reyes exhaled, jaw clenched. "How long until detonation?" "Less than 2 hours if the core chain starts, maybe less." He turned toward the crew, his voice low but unshakable. "If that core goes, everyone in orbit dies, refugees, miners. Every station in the sector." Silence filled the bridge. The pilot whispered, "Sir, are you saying we're going back?" Reyes nodded slowly. "We can't outrun that blast, so we stop it." The engineer slammed a hand on the console. "That's suicide." Reyes met his gaze and said, "Then we'll make it a meaningful one." The bridge went quiet again. Then one by one the humans straightened. No one argued, because every one of them knew what it meant to wear the Terran insignia. It meant no one left behind. even entire worlds down in the medical bay. Sarah felt the shift in the engines. She looked out the window and saw the ship turning. Diving back toward the storm, her breath caught in her throat. No. Why are they going back? A voice answered from the speaker. Captain Reyes himself, calm and resolute. Passengers remain secure. We're stabilizing the reactor to save orbital survivors. We'll get you to safety soon. She could hardly believe what she heard. These humans had already saved her and her child, and yet they were going back into the fire. Leary looked up at her and whispered, "Mama, the captain's not afraid." Sarah pressed her forehead to his, tears mixing with the rumbling air. "No, my love, he's not." Minutes later, the vigilant horizon plunged through the black clouds again, its engines glowing red against the storm. The floodwaters below now shimmered with sickly green light as the core radiation seeped out. The dam structures collapsed entirely, turning continents into boiling seas. Inside the bridge, the sensors screamed with warnings. But Reyes stood like a statue. "Helm, approach vector locked," he said. The pilot replied, "Locked, sir, but if the core breaches, we're vapor." Reyes smirked faintly. "Then we'll make sure it doesn't." As they descended lower, the scanners revealed the source. The central core reactor facility, half submerged in the middle of the ocean, surrounded by spiraling vortexes of energy. It looked like a glowing wound on the face of the planet. Reyes leaned forward. "That's our target. Prep the engineering pods. We'll stabilize it manually if we have to." The crew froze for a second, realizing he meant to go down himself. "Sir," the officer said, "you can't go down there. The radiation—" Reyes cut him off. "This isn't a request." He turned to the comms tech. "Patch me to medical." Sarah's voice came through, faint and emotional. "Captain, please don't go back down there. You've done enough." He smiled sadly, though she couldn't see it. "We haven't done enough until the sky's safe again." He disconnected and grabbed his helmet. As the crew prepared his descent pod, lightning illuminated the human faces around him. Tired, bruised, determined, they all knew the risks. And yet no one moved to stop him. Reyes turned once more to the viewport. Watching the storm swirl below, he whispered quietly, "If humanity ever forgets compassion, we become no better than the void." Then, to his crew, "Let's finish this." The scene cuts to the descent pod detaching from the vigilant horizon, falling through smoke and rain. Inside, Reyes checks his oxygen, glances at the small charm hanging inside the pod, a metal fragment engraved with his ship's emblem. He closes his eyes for a moment, seeing his homeworld far away, its blue sky and quiet sun. Then he looks forward again, eyes sharp. Below, the reactor shines like a star trapped underwater, waiting for its end, and the human captain dives straight toward it. Back aboard the ship, the crew watches silently. Sarah stands at the medbay door, holding her son as the alarms echo softly around them. She whispers, "He's going back to save everyone, even those who left us behind." Leary looks at her and says, "Humans are strange, Mama." She nods slowly, eyes glistening. "Yes, strange and beautiful." The chapter closes with the pod vanishing into lightning. A single voice echoes over the comms, Captain Reyes saying calmly, "For every life worth saving, we go again." The storm swallows his signal, and the audience is left breathless, watching the light fade into the dark sea, knowing this is humanity at its truest. The storm outside had become a monster of its own. The sky bled with electric fire, and the planet's ocean boiled from the radiation below. From orbit, the vigilant horizon looked like a single spark hovering above a dying world. Inside the descent pod, Captain Daniel Reyes breathed slowly, his heartbeat echoing in the cramped silence. Every vibration of the storm shook the pod like a drum, but he never looked away from the display. Coordinates locked. Reactor chamber ahead, pressure rising. He whispered to himself, "Hold together, old girl. Just a little longer." The pod sliced through rain and lightning, crashing into the water near the burning reactor platform. Metal shrieked and hissed as the pod sealed itself against the flooded structure. Reyes opened the hatch, water pouring in around his boots. He stepped out in a heavy exosuit, light cutting through the black mist. The reactor tower loomed above him, half collapsed, glowing with green light that shimmered across the water. It looked less like a machine and more like a wounded heart, beating out of rhythm inside the vigilant horizon. The bridge crew watched his signal flicker on the screen. "Captain, radiation spiking beyond limit. You've got maybe 15 minutes. the engineer warned. Reyes smiled faintly through the comms. Then I'd better not waste any of them. He forced open the main gate. Stepping into the ruined control corridor, the floor was flooded knee-deep, cables hanging like vines from the ceiling. Sparks jumped from the walls, lighting the path ahead like lightning in a tunnel. He passed the bodies of alien engineers and long gone, still at their posts, their hands frozen over consoles. He whispered softly, "You tried. I'll finish it." Each step echoed like thunder, each breath a struggle through his damaged filter. He reached the core chamber and stopped, staring in awe. A massive sphere of light pulsed in the center, cracked open like an egg, leaking raw energy into the sea below. It was beautiful and deadly at once. Reyes activated his wrist display, typing commands to reroute cooling power from his suit to the main stabilizer. It wasn't designed for this, but neither was he. Steam rose as the temperature rose inside his armor, burning his arms and back. "Core override engaged," the computer's voice said through static. He pulled a lever, forcing the emergency seal shut. But it jammed halfway. The entire platform shuddered as the water pressure shifted again. He gritted his teeth, pressing with all his strength. "Come on," he growled, "not today." His hand slipped, and the suit's gloves melted slightly from heat. He screamed, pushed again, and finally, with a sharp crack and the valve sealed, inside the ship above, the crew watched readings stabilize one by one. "Radiation levels dropping, containment 75%, the engineer shouted. Cheers echoed across the bridge. Sarah and Leary stood near the medbay window. Watching the ocean calm, the mother whispered, "He did it. He actually did it." The child smiled faintly. Humans keep their promises. But then the joy turned to silence as the comms officer looked up, his face pale. "Sir, we're losing his signal." Static filled the speakers, the captain's voice barely audible. "Containment complete. System locked. Tell them to look after the boy." And then nothing. The ship hung silent for a moment, everyone frozen. Sarah covered her mouth, whispering, "No, please no." Reyes's suit beacon blinked once, then vanished from the radar below. The reactor stabilized completely. The explosion ceased, and the sea began to calm for the first time in months. The world was safe, but the man who saved it was gone. On the bridge, no one spoke. The pilot wiped his eyes quietly while the engineer muttered, "He always said we don't leave people behind." "Even when it's himself," the commander lowered his head, whispering, "Wave goodbye, Captain." Hours passed. The storm finally breaking into silence, the vigilant horizon circled the planet. Scanning every wave for a trace, there was none, until a faint ping appeared on the long-range sensors. "Wait," the comms tech shouted. "We've got a beacon, at 12 kilometers east." The entire bridge came alive, lock coordinates. The ship turned sharply, engines roaring back to life. Through the thick fog, a small escape pod floated between twisted metal and rising steam, half crushed, half burned, but still intact. The recovery drone lifted it aboard and medics rushed in. Inside the shattered pod lay Daniel Reyes, unconscious, breathing shallowly but alive. His helmet cracked, skin burned, suit leaking fluid. Sarah ran forward, tears in her eyes, kneeling beside him as the medics worked. She held his cold hand and whispered, "You came for us, and now the universe came for you." The medic stabilized him, transferring him to the medical bay. For the first time in years, Sarah prayed, not to her gods, but to his. The boy stood beside her. Holding the captain's insignia patch tightly in his hands, he whispered, "He's not done yet." "Mama." Outside, dawn broke over the flooded planet. The clouds parted slightly, revealing a ray of golden light touching the waves. The human ship hovered silently, its shadow stretching across the calm sea. The storm was over, but something greater had been born, a story that would echo across galaxies. The story of one man who faced the flood, defied the impossible, and refused to let strangers die. A story that proved once again that humanity's heart burns brightest in the darkest storms. The screen fades slowly, the light from the sunrise reflecting across the water, and through the comms, a faint voice crackles, Captain Reyes whispering, "Told you we'd make it." The crew smiles, relief turning to laughter. The mother closes her eyes, whispering back, "You did." Music swells softly and the human cruiser sails toward the rising sun, carrying life, hope, and a new bond between worlds. The floodwaters of Nerath finally began to fall. The endless rain had stopped, the gray clouds parted, and for the first time in 100 days, sunlight touched the planet's surface. Every beam of light turned the black ocean silver, reflecting a quiet miracle born from fire and sacrifice above the calm world. The human ship Vigilant Horizon floated silently in low orbit, its hull scorched, its crew exhausted, but its heart still beating strong inside the medical bay. Captain Daniel Reyes lay under soft blue lights, breathing slow but steady. His face was pale, his body wrapped in medical bandages, yet even in sleep, his expression was calm, the expression of a man who had kept his promise. Beside him sat Sarah, the alien mother he had saved, her hands trembling as she placed a small metal charm on the table, the same insignia she had taken from his ruined armor. Her son Leary stood at her side, staring at the human captain with wide, silent eyes filled with respect. He whispered softly, "Mama, he still sleeps." She smiled faintly. "He's resting, my love. Heroes need rest." The door opened and the human doctor entered quietly, his uniform marked with oil and ash. He smiled at them gently. "He'll make it. His body's tougher than most machines I've seen." Sarah closed her eyes in relief, whispering, "Thank you. Thank you for saving him." The doctor shook his head. "No, ma'am, he saved all of us outside." The bridge was alive again, but in a quieter way. The crew worked in silence, patching systems, sending rescue signals to other ships stranded in orbit. One by one, transmissions from nearby refugee fleets answered back. Voices of survivors, thousands of them, speaking across channels. "Human vessel. We received the stabilization code. Our orbit is safe again. Your captain. He saved us all." The communications officer smiled through tears, turning to the engineer. "They're alive. The whole fleet survived." For a long moment, no one spoke, and then the bridge filled with clapping, quiet and proud later. When Captain Reyes finally woke, his vision blurry, he found himself surrounded by both human crew and alien refugees. Sarah was the first to step forward, holding Leary's hand. Her voice was soft but strong. "Captain, my world lives because of you. My child breathes because you came back for us. We can never repay this," Reyes tried to speak, his throat dry, but he smiled weakly and said, "Then teach him to be kind. That's payment enough." Leary looked up at him, eyes glowing with wonder. "Will you come back, Captain?" Reyes chuckled faintly. "Maybe one day. When the stars are calm." Sarah bowed her head deeply. Not in fear, but in honor. News of what happened spread quickly through every corner of the sector. Across the alien colonies and human outposts, the story of the human who fought the flood became a legend. They spoke of a man who risked his life not for glory, not for power, but for strangers who had nothing left. They spoke of a race, humanity, who walked into the storm when others turned away. Alien leaders who once called humans reckless and primitive began to whisper new words. They are dangerous, but dangerous in the best way. Weeks passed, and the survivors of Nerath began rebuilding. Human ships brought supplies, shelters, and engineers to help restore what the flood had destroyed. Children played near the water's edge again, their laughter mixing with the sound of Terran engines above. Sarah watched from a high hill, her son standing beside her, holding the small metallic charm Reyes had given him before leaving. He said quietly, "Mama, do you think they'll remember us?" She smiled. "No, my love, we'll remember them." Above them, the sky shimmered with stars and the faint outline of the Vigilant Horizon, moving toward its next mission. Inside that ship, Reyes stood by the main viewport, his arm still in a sling, gazing down at the peaceful planet below. His second officer joined him and said softly, "You could have died down there, sir." Reyes smiled faintly. "Yeah, but then who'd keep the promise?" "The promise?" the officer asked. He looked out into the stars, his reflection flickering in the glass. "That no one fights alone while humans still breathe." The officer nodded quietly, and as the Vigilant Horizon turned toward the bright edge of the galaxy, the ship's engines ignited like a dawn made of fire. It sailed past clouds of gold and silver, a streak of light carrying the mark of humanity. Courage, compassion, and defiance against despair. Far below on the reborn world, Sarah and Leary watched the ship rise until it vanished beyond sight. The child whispered, "The stars are warm again." The mother smiled, tears glimmering in her eyes, because a human touched them. The camera pans upward, following the ship as it disappears into the endless night. The narrator's voice fades in softly. "In the silence of the void, some stars shine brighter not because they are larger, but because they carry hearts that refuse to dim. And so, In every whisper between galaxies, when the storms rise again, they still speak of the day a human captain heard a faint signal through the rain, and answered, because that's what humanity does always,